In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to improve your hip abduction using something called the frog stretch. So we're going to be discussing how to go or get into a good passive stretch for or in the frog stretch, but then I'm going to be showing you how to apply PAILs and rails to try and improve some of the mobility in the hip joint while you stay in that stretch, okay? First things first, we're going to be going over positioning for the stretch. Now, for the frog stretch, I always stress that you don't want to start bringing your knees out while your hips are back already, okay? So I want you to start with your knees right under your hips. Widen the knees as wide as you can tolerate or as far as possible. And then keep your heels in line with your knee. So if you look at your heel, it shouldn't be inside the line of your knee or outside, just right in line, okay? And that you're basically trying to create 90-degree angles. Now from here, you're gonna drop onto your elbows. You're gonna start to extend your back a little bit, so you're gonna actually tip your pelvis. That's gonna start to pre-stretch the groin or the adductors. And you're gonna start to push yourself back using your hands. And you should feel a really good stretch on the inside of your hips. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm barely breaking 90 degrees. If you're going all the way back to your heels, either you're not wide enough or your feet are too close to each other, okay? So make sure you make those adjustments. And the reason that's important is because you want to be able to take the slack out of your hip and be able to get a good stretch without sitting too far back on the heels. So if you feel a really deep stretch and you're just barely breaking 90 degrees, you're doing this right. And so we're just gonna hold. This is a really good stretch. You don't want to crank on this too much. You just want to chill out. Breathe. Exhale. Use every breath to go an inch deeper. Good. Now, you don't have to stay on the elbows. You can go on the hands. That's going to give you a little bit more leverage to sit back and get a little bit more crank in the stretch, but that's totally up to you. I'm probably going to transition now that I'm a little more comfortable. I like to even widen my hands a little bit to give myself more support. So now here comes the PAILs contraction or the PAILs engagement of the hip joint. PAIL simply means we're going to be contracting the stuff on the opening side. So since we're opening up into hip abduction, we're going to really engage the adductors on the inside of the hip. So I'm going to count to 4. As I count up, I want you to think about keeping the slight arch in your spine as you try and drive your knees towards each other. So you're basically trying to bring your knees together, but you don't want to bring your knees together and then round your spine. So keep the slight arch in your back. As I count up to 4, drive your knees together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold this effort for 5, 4, 3, 2, inhale, exhale, and relax. So what you should have noticed is the stuff on the inside of the hip or your groin area really engage and contract. So we're going to repeat that. 1, start to drive the knees together. 2, 3, you can even think about driving the feet together as you drive into the ground. 4, hold. Think about scrunching the mat up between your legs for 3, 2, 1, and melt away. Good. You should notice you go a little bit deeper every exhale or every PAIL contraction. One more time. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, big breath in. Exhale. Relax into the stretch. Good. Okay. Now we're going to go into the rails contraction. Now this one, if you think about what the opposite of driving your knees out, in is, you think I'm going to cue you to push your knees out, but instead we're going to be focusing on actually improving hip internal rotation in this hip abducted position. So, and the only reason we're doing that is because it's actually a little bit easier to execute, but you still get a really good joint mobilization. So I'm going to ask you to go on your elbows And I'm going to count to 4. And as I count up, I want you to slowly think about lifting your heels and your ankles off the ground, okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Try and lift those ankles off the ground and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, and melt away. So basically mobilizing into hip internal rotation in this abducted position. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and lift for 5, 4, 3, 2, and melt away. Good. And one last round. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and lift for 5, 4, 3, 2, and melt away. Good. Now slowly getting out of this is going to be a little tough. I like to go on my hands, then I like to just drive one knee in at a time. That is definitely a little sensitive, so take your time coming out of it. So let's quickly review. So we went over how to get into a frog stretch. Remember to drive your knees out and push them apart while your knees are under your hips. You don't want to sit too far back on the heels because that means either your heels are too close together or you didn't push your knees out wide enough, okay? So that's how you get into the passive stretch. For the PAILs contraction, you drive your knees towards each other as if you're trying to bring your knees together. Hold that contraction for about 5 seconds as you take 4 seconds to ramp up to your effort. For the rails contraction, instead of thinking about pushing your knees apart, you're thinking about lifting your feet off the ground. So that's going to mobilize internal rotation. So take 4 seconds to ramp up that effort and then hold that effort for about 5 seconds, okay? And that's frog stretch, PAILs, rails.